I've always believed that peace is something you earn, not something that simply happens to you. For years, I worked to build a life that felt safe, steady, and full of love, a life far removed from the chaos that once shaped me. My name is Ethan Ramirez, and I wear a police badge in the small town of Harlow, Nebraska, where the wind rolls over golden plains and neighbors wave from their porches. To outsiders, Harlow seems like a postcard, a place where children ride their bikes down quiet streets, and the biggest excitement is the annual Harvest Fair. But beneath every calm surface, there's a current of stories, some tender, some painful, and some that never really fade. Every morning, I wake before dawn. The smell of coffee fills the kitchen as sunlight creeps across the windows. My wife, Sophia, always greets me with that sleepy smile that makes me feel grounded. Our daughter, Lily, is 4 years old and the heartbeat of our home. Her laughter dances through every room, and her curiosity keeps our days bright. She's the reason I breathe easier, the reason I remind myself that good things can grow even in the soil of a broken past. Most mornings, after breakfast, I walk Lily to preschool. She chatters the whole way, about butterflies, clouds shaped like dragons, and the storybooks we read the night before. Her hand fits perfectly in mine, and in those few blocks, the world feels right. By the time I drop her off and head to the station, I've already won the day, but even in the comfort of that routine, a shadow sometimes lingers. It hides behind the smiles, a whisper from a time I've tried to bury. My past isn't something I talk about. Not with my colleagues, not even with Sophia. But every so often, when the wind howls late at night, or a sudden noise echoes in the quiet, I'm pulled back, to the house I grew up in, to the sound of my father's voice when it turned from calm to thunder. My father, Victor Ramirez, was a man people respected and feared in equal measure. He worked hard, but he ruled harder. My mother, Elena, was his opposite, a soft-spoken woman with eyes that carried both love and sorrow. She was the kind of person who made even silence feel warm. Yet, I can still remember the nights when that warmth disappeared, replaced by tension, so thick you could almost taste it in the air. I was 10 when I first realized something was wrong, really wrong. I remember sitting in my room, hugging my knees as voices rose from the living room. Then came the crash of something breaking, my mother's muffled sob, and my father's anger cutting through the air like a blade. Those nights shaped me. I'd lie there wishing for the courage to step in, to stop him. But I was just a scared kid, helpless and small. The next morning, my mother would put on her smile, cook breakfast, and act as though the night before had never happened. I used to ask her why she stayed. She'd just say, because families stick together, Ethan. Even then, I knew she was lying, to herself, maybe more than to me. By the time I turned 17, I wasn't the same timid boy anymore. I'd grown taller, stronger, and angrier. I'd also grown tired of watching my mother suffer in silence. One night, when my father came home after too much to drink and started shouting about dinner being late, something in me snapped. I remember stepping between them, heart pounding, telling him to stop. The look on his face when I spoke up, surprise turning to rage, was something I'll never forget. He shoved me so hard I hit the wall, the pain searing through my shoulder. "You think you're a man now," he sneered. "You're just as weak as your mother." Those words burned into me. But they also lit a fire I've never let go of. That night, I promised myself that one day, I'd dedicate my life to protecting people like her, the ones who couldn't fight back. That promise is what led me into law enforcement. And while my father called it a fool's job, I knew it was my purpose. I left home soon after, keeping contact only with my mother. I'd visit her quietly when I could, always when my father wasn't around. I begged her to leave him, but she never did. "He's still your father," she'd say softly. And one day, he'll change. That day never came, years passed. I built my life in Harlow. I married Sophia, the most compassionate woman I've ever known, and together we brought Lily into the world. With them, I learned what love really meant. Still, I couldn't shake the occasional guilt that I'd escaped while my mother stayed behind. I'd send her money, call her often, and she'd always sound fine. But there was something in her voice, a tiredness she couldn't hide. One evening, after a long shift at the station, I sat on the porch watching the storm clouds roll in. The sky turned the color of steel, and the wind carried that electric scent that comes before heavy rain. Inside, Sophia was putting Lily to bed, humming softly. The moment felt peaceful, like every other night. But peace can shatter in a heartbeat. It started with a knock. Not the casual kind, but desperate, frantic. It was nearly 2 in the morning, and my instincts kicked in immediately. I grabbed my pistol from the table, approached the door, and called out, "Who's there?" Through the rain, I heard it. A voice I hadn't heard in months, trembling and weak. "Ethan, it's me." I froze. That voice belonged to my mother. I threw open the door. There she was, soaked to the bone, her face pale and streaked with rain. She looked smaller than I remembered, frail. Her clothes clung to her, and her eyes were wide with fear. "Mom?" I caught her just before she collapsed into my arms. She was shaking uncontrollably. I carried her inside, laying her gently on the couch. Sophia came running down the stairs in her robe, eyes widening in shock. Together, we wrapped my mother in blankets, trying to warm her up. She clung to my hand as she whispered, He did it again, Ethan. He threw me out." My stomach tightened. I didn't need to ask who he was. Between sobs, she told me everything. My father, Victor, had found himself a new companion, Brooke, a woman half his age, charming in all the wrong ways. Rumor had it she'd been pushing him to sell the house and transfer the land to her. When my mother refused to sign the papers, his temper exploded. "He said he doesn't need me anymore," she cried softly. "He told me I was in the way." Sophia sat beside her, holding her hand. "You're safe here," she said gently. "We'll take care of you." I should have trusted my instincts sooner. The first signs were small, barely noticeable to anyone who wasn't looking. It started with phone calls. My grandmother's voice, once so warm and steady, sounded distant, almost guarded. "I'm fine, Ethan," she'd insist, even when I hadn't asked. "Your work must keep you busy." Then she'd quickly change the subject, as if afraid someone might overhear. At first, I convinced myself she was simply adjusting to her new surroundings. But one afternoon, I dropped by unannounced after finishing a delivery early. The scene that greeted me still burns in my mind. I heard raised voices from the kitchen, my mother's sharp tone cutting through the air. "Mom, you left the dishes in the sink again. Do you want ants crawling everywhere?" When I stepped in, my grandmother was standing by the counter, wringing a towel between her hands, her eyes downcast like a child being scolded. My mother turned at once, her face morphing into a mask of welcome. "Ethan. What a surprise. We were just baking." But the look my grandmother gave me said everything. Her eyes pleaded for silence. At dinner that night, the tension was thick enough to taste. When Eleanor accidentally dropped her glass, it shattered across the tile. My father slammed his newspaper onto the table. "Mom, you need to be careful. Those glasses aren't cheap." She flinched, murmured an apology, and began to pick up the shards with trembling fingers. My mother sighed dramatically. "Leave it, Mom. Just sit down." I wanted to shout, to tell them to stop treating her like a burden. But she caught my gaze and gave the faintest shake of her head. Not now, her eyes said. After that night, I began calling her more often, hoping she'd open up. But her answers grew shorter, her tone hollow. Once, I heard my father's voice in the background, sharp and angry, followed by her whispering, "Signal's bad, dear. I'll call later." The line went dead. I couldn't ignore it anymore. When her 81st birthday approached, I decided to bring some joy back into her world. I ordered a chocolate cake, the kind she used to bake for me as a kid, decorated with sugar flowers. I called my mother to plan a small family gathering. She agreed, all false cheer and forced sweetness. "Of course, Ethan," she said. "It'll make her so happy." That Saturday, I arrived early, cake box in hand, heart full of hope. The house gleamed as always, crystal vases, shining floors, but the air felt wrong. Still, I tried to focus on my grandmother's face when she saw me. "Ethan," she said softly, rising from her chair. "You came." Her arms felt lighter than ever as she hugged me. The evening began pleasantly enough. A few neighbors came over, lured by my parents' charm. My mother moved about like a hostess at a charity gala, smiling for every compliment. My father bragged about his recent promotion, boasting how he'd balanced work and caring for family. I sat beside my grandmother, her smile fixed but strained. Then came the moment that changed everything. A neighbor asked my father how he managed to afford his lifestyle. My father laughed, half joking. "Oh, we get by. Though taking care of Mom adds to the bills." Eleanor looked confused. "But, Victor," she said gently, "didn't you and Lydia already receive your share from the house sale? Why would money be tight?" The room went still. My father's face turned rigid. My mother's smile froze. "Mom," my father said through clenched teeth, "that's private." "I only meant," she began, but he slammed his hand on the table. "Enough." The sound startled everyone. He swept his arm, knocking the cake to the floor. Frosting and flowers scattered like shattered peace. My grandmother burst into tears. My mother tried to smooth things over, muttering apologies to the guests, but I couldn't stay quiet. "Dad," I said, voice shaking, "what's wrong with you?" He glared at me. "You think you know everything. You don't understand what it's like to carry this family, Carrie." I echoed bitterly. "You're breaking it." Without another word, I helped my grandmother from her chair and led her out. She didn't resist. Her hand trembled in mine as we walked to my truck. That night, I told her she could live with me. My apartment was small, my salary modest, but I would never let her be mistreated again. She hesitated at first, worried she'd be a burden, but I saw the relief in her eyes. The adjustment wasn't easy. She slept in my bedroom while I took the sofa. I worked extra shifts, cut corners wherever I could. Some days, she'd pretend she wasn't hungry so I'd eat more. When I caught her, she just smiled and said, "You've done enough for me already." But in that cramped apartment, life felt more real than it had in years. We shared coffee at dawn, watched the rain from the window, and laughed over simple dinners. She started tending to a few potted herbs on the sill: basil, rosemary, thyme. "See," she said one morning, touching a sprouting leaf. "Even small things grow when they are cared for." 3 years passed in that rhythm. I earned a promotion, a small raise. We replaced the rickety table with a sturdier one, bought a second-hand armchair for her. For the first time in a long while, I saw peace in her eyes again. Then, one afternoon, the past knocked on my door. A woman stood there, mid-50s, auburn curls, kind smile. "Ethan," she said, "I'm Lydia. Your aunt." I hadn't seen her since childhood. She'd moved to France decades ago. My grandmother gasped and rushed forward, tears spilling as they embraced. Lydia explained she'd come to visit and check on her mother. I've been sending money for her care, she said, looking confused. Your parents told me she was ill. My stomach sank. She showed me proof, bank transfers, messages. Over the years, she had sent them more than $100,000, believing it went toward Eleanor's medical bills. My grandmother's hands shook as she read the records. They used my house money and hers, she whispered. I'd never seen her cry like that. Lydia's expression hardened. They lied to both of us. We drove to my parents' house the next morning, rain streaking the windshield. The confrontation was quiet at first, Lydia's calm voice against my father's sputtering denial. But when she placed the printed records on the table, his facade cracked. I had debts, he admitted finally. The bank cut my hours, and I needed help. I said, barely containing my anger. You pressured Grandma to sell her home, then stole from your own sister. My mother wept, but the sound felt hollow. Lydia, her voice steady, drafted a repayment contract. They signed it with shaking hands. Ashamed. We left in silence. In the months that followed, my parents' perfect world crumbled. The truth spread through family and friends, and the image they'd built for decades fell apart. Their house, once filled with laughter, grew cold and empty, but Eleanor. She healed. Slowly, gently, surrounded by honesty at last. Lydia stayed for several weeks before returning to France. Before she left, she asked my grandmother to come with her. You'll love it there, she said. A little garden, warm weather, and peace. My grandmother hesitated. What about Ethan? I smiled. You deserve rest, Grandma. Go live the life you gave up for everyone else. The day she left was bittersweet. She hugged me tight at the airport, her voice soft in my ear. Remember what I told you, Ethan. Stay kind, no matter how unkind the world becomes. I watched her plane disappear into the clouds, and for the first time I felt something close to peace. With the money Lydia left me as thanks, a gift I hadn't expected, I started my own small delivery company. I named it Carter Shipping, in honor of my grandmother's strength and kindness. It wasn't easy, broken trucks, long nights, endless hurdle. But her spirit kept me going. Eventually the business grew. I hired people who needed a second chance, treated them the way she had taught me, with patience, respect, and heart.